Last year, a company which is listed as a trader of tiles and ceramic items wanted to change its name to include the words artificial intelligence in it.
In a stock exchange filing, ceramic tile maker Dhyani Tile and Marbles is now changing its name to Dhyani Artificial Intelligence Limited.
Recently, on the television show Shark Tank India, there was a pitch by a kitchen appliance company which had added a .ai to their name. One of my colleagues at ET recently was approached by a soap-making company which claimed to be using AI, apparently to suit a customer's skin concerns, and they're calling themselves an AI-first company. And here's what Henry Kravis of private equity firm KKR joked about in a recent interview with ET.
All you have to do is put AI in your name and you're going to get a higher evaluation. I've thought maybe we should add AI to KKR, KKR.ai.
The AI buzz is everywhere. Everyone is calling themselves an AI-first company. But who's actually building AI, especially in India? And are companies able to monetize AI? And finally, will capital be the only moat? In this episode of The Morning Brief, we dive deep into the world of AI to understand what is artificial intelligence and what is just artificial. I speak to Vivek Raghavan of Sarvam AI, one of the first few companies building the AI infrastructure out of India, and Hemant Mohapatra of Lightspeed, a venture capital firm which has taken a bet on several AI companies globally. It is Thursday, the 15th of February. I'm Mugdha Warrior of ET Prime, and you're listening to the ABCs of building AI in India on The Morning Brief. The AI era is definitely here.
But I feel this AI age is very similar. That is, it's diffusing, right? If you think about what PCs did, they brought information at your fingertips. This age of AI is really expertise at your fingertips.
That's Satya Nadella of Microsoft, which has now become the most valuable company in the world, in no small part thanks to its AI partner OpenAI. But Microsoft is definitely not alone in riding the AI wave. This AI frenzy has put graphics cards maker Nvidia ahead of companies like Google and Amazon in market cap, mainly because a lot of AI companies like OpenAI need hundreds of Nvidia's chips to train their algorithms. And recent reports said that OpenAI CEO Sam Altman is said to be seeking a mind-boggling $7 trillion for a project in the AI chip space. Another generative AI startup, Anthropic, is said to be seeking a $15 billion valuation in its new round. And Indian companies are looking to catch up. Closer home, we have had Ola founder Bhavish Aggarwal announce an AI company which is now already a unicorn.
Ola founder Bhavish Aggarwal has just made a hat-trick with unicorns. AI startup Kritrim has announced that it has raised $50 million in funding, which takes its value to $1 billion.
Another AI company, Sarvam AI, founded by Vivek Raghavan and Pratyush Kumar, raised over $40 million recently from investors such as Lightspeed, Peak 15, as well as Khosla Ventures.
Sarvam AI had made the news after raising $41 million, and they've again made headlines by launching OpenHutti. This is their first Hindi large language model, and it's making waves right now in India's tech scene.
In this episode, I chat with Vivek Raghavan, one of the founders of Sarvam AI, along with his investor Hemant Mohapatra, partner at Lightspeed India. Vivek had earlier been part of Aadhaar's parent entity UIDAI, and he and his co-founder had previously worked at Nandan Nilekani-backed AI for Bharat Research Lab at IIT Madras before they launched their own venture. Hemant of Lightspeed has taken several bets in the AI space, including on companies such as Rephrase AI, which was behind the digital avatars of several celebrities in some popular ads, as well as Next Billion AI, which helps enterprises build their own mapping ecosystem. Hemant and Vivek, thank you so much for joining us in this episode. And one of the reasons we are really doing this discussion is to kind of cut through the noise around AI that has only been growing over the past year, right? And we just want to find out, how do you really evaluate or value an AI company? And how does the game change if you want to be an AI company building out of India? Hemant, I wanted to start with you first because Lightspeed has been investing in the AI space for a long time now. So, welcome on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Mugdha.
And can you talk to us about what are the changes or the big developments that you have seen in AI, especially in the last few years, which has really brought AI to the forefront now? And everyone is talking about AI now.
So, I mean, the way we think about these generational technological waves is there is a lot of capex that goes into the ground to sort of build the fundamental layers of the technologies, right? So think of it as 20, 30, sometimes 50, 60-year long research cycles that go into truly unlocking a new kind of a resource that the world can then take and then build on top of. If you look at the first AI or AGI paper, it came in 1950s. You've seen first order effects in research papers, but also second order effects in Hollywood movies, where Terminator is kind of like one of the things that people discussed way back then, right? So it's not a new topic. And with most technologies, you sort of keep heads down, builders will build, researchers will research, and 30, 40 years later, one day it reaches this threshold when it starts to almost move away from clunky, taped up together technologies that are very brittle. If you do something different, it'll just break, to something that's very magical, right? That seems to have been what happened to the world of AI over 30, 40 years of hardcore research has now led to a point where suddenly, it seems sudden, but it's taken decades to get here. It's magical. That's one part of the equation. Second part is a company called OpenAI obviously has taken that and then launched a product on top of it. And suddenly, within 2-3 months, they hit 100 million users, right? And when you hit that kind of a scale, there's an internet relevant critical mass that you achieve, where suddenly, even just 2-3 years ago, an AI developer would be asking for resources to his or her CEO. Now it's like the CEO is asking, what are you doing about AI? And we are feeling like it's an overnight thing, but it's actually taken decades to get here.
I think ChatGPT was just the trigger, but there was a lot of work happening before that as well. And most companies are looking to add .ai to their names now, right? And they may not even be doing core AI. And how are you evaluating companies that are coming to you saying they are doing AI? Like, what are the metrics now to evaluate what is the monetization, what is the differentiation, the competition that is growing in the space? What are your parameters that you look at?
Yeah, certainly the website idea is not featured into the parameters that we have. So you can have .ai, .io, it doesn't matter to us, as long as it's doing true high quality AI with true high quality, research going in the company. We are interested to pay, we are interested to dig in more and pay attention to what you have to say. What do we look for? It depends on what part of AI you are focused on, right? I mentioned earlier as well in a blog I wrote last month that there's the infrastructure layer for AI, almost the nuts and bolts of what allows people to build interesting technologies on top of. But before you get to the upper layers, you got to stabilize and almost get to a high quality engineering framework that is stable, scalable, secure below the layers. So right now we are at the stage of AI where a bunch of fundamental things are not ready. Extracting value from GPUs and then packaging it as an AI token, inference token, training token, it's still very inefficient. So in AI, there's an archetype of founders who are going to be extremely good at digging for AI tokens effectively, efficiently. And then there'll be an archetype of founders who are going to be amazing at picking that token and building something on top of and commercializing it, distributing it really effectively. So we have those filters specific to what you're trying to build, and then we build a point of view basis those filters.
And I think one such founder is with us, a founder that you've backed and a company that you've backed. Vivek, you're building Sarvam AI, which is a large language model based on Indic languages. So, in fact, I think let's just start from the very basic for the listener to just understand what a large language model is, the foundational model is, and what does it take to build that kind of an AI infrastructure?
Yeah, firstly, thanks for having me on this podcast. And I think what we are doing is that we are actually trying to build something which is kind of what we call as a full stack Gen AI. Our intent at Sarvam is to actually think about how Indians will use Gen AI, right, at a massive scale. And that's the intent of what we want to do. And we want to do that by understanding things from, what are the inefficiencies in building a foundational model, and how can we build a specialized foundational model for, Indian languages and Indian contexts, to what are the mechanisms by which Indians will actually use Gen AI, and reimagining some of those things. I think the core really of what a large language model is obviously these are these extremely large models, but what these models actually end up doing are they actually are able to kind of generate language. Soon it becomes multimodal, but let's just take, for simplicity, talk about text. They can generate text, and in response to the question that somebody may have. And that is really what these models do. And the amazing thing is that these kind of generative models have been there for a few years, but what it seems now is that they are able to obviously generate extremely both high quality and engaging text, which actually answers real questions that people have, right? That is really, at one level, that's what a large language model is. At another level is these large language models have been fed with data from the entire web and has been crawled and has been put in there. So in many cases, these large language models are actually also, in some sense, they are the compression of all the knowledge and all the information that exists there that has been encapsulated in this model. And so therefore, when you prompt it with a question, then it actually provides you an answer from its understanding of the world. That's what a large language model is. And the interesting thing is that large language models have a very large number of parameters, and then they are trained on a very large amount of data. To actually create a large language model, you need a huge amount of compute to actually train these models. So therefore, it is the largest models, probably hundreds of billions of parameters, and they're actually trained on trillions, tens of trillions of tokens of information.
Vivek, can you quickly just explain what AI tokens are?
For example, if you take a sentence of, say, 10 words in English, okay? So, and typically when I actually feed that to an LLM, that sentence will be converted into tokens. Now, what happens is that typically a 10-word token in English, probably if I used something like GPT-4, and here I'm giving a rough number, it may become 10 words, may become 12 tokens. So 1.2 is kind of a ratio that is there between words and tokens if I may set a sentence in, say, in English. But if I set a sentence in, say, Hindi, that same 10 words will become 40 tokens. And the way, LLMs are priced, they are priced based on input and output tokens. And the computational cost is also based on input and output tokens. So the same question is actually 4 times more expensive if you ask it in Hindi.
Vivek, you did say that you're looking at how Indians will use AI. So is that why you're also looking at voice LLMs? And if you can just talk to us a little bit about that,
Yes.
what you're doing differently there.
If you look at the LLMs that have been like GPT-4 and things like that, they obviously have used a very, very large amount of data. But the amount of Indian data that is in there is actually quite small. And then if you're looking at people in India who are communicating in different languages, their ability to actually interact with LLMs through text is actually quite, especially anybody who's tried to type in an Indian language would know that it is actually not very convenient to do. And secondly, the other part which is there is this thing called tokenized attacks. Indian words and Indian are not represented in an efficient manner in these LLMs. So the same query, if I asked in English and I asked it in Hindi, actually is 4 times more expensive, okay, in Hindi. And of course, actually it gets worse once you go to other Indian languages. And so therefore, there are 2 of these things. One is that it's not easy to type in Indian languages. And secondly, it's more expensive. And of course, the amount of data that these models have seen in these particular areas is actually quite small. So what we've said is that we want to do 3 things. One is that we want to make our LLMs voice driven, because I think that speaking is the most natural interface and we want to actually make our LLMs, a voice-to-voice LLMs. The second thing is that we are building these LLMs, and we're actually creating ways by which Indian languages can be represented efficiently, can be tokenized efficiently in our models. So therefore, they would then be both cheaper, and of course, we will have much larger percentage of our data would be of Indian context and in Indian languages. So then that actually, even though we are training smaller models, right, which are more efficient, which actually run faster, still they will be actually extremely strong in Indian languages and will allow Indians to actually do things that they want to do with this. And that's the essential idea of what we want to do.
So then that brings me to my next question then, Vivek. You said a lot of the larger LLMs, especially the global ones, have not used a lot of Indian language data. And you are training your algorithms and your transformer, as it is called, on Indian languages. So what kind of data sets are you using, and what are the challenges or limitations there, especially given, the data protection rules, etc.? Can you just talk to us about how you've trained your LLM and how long was that process for?
No. So, firstly, the training is an ongoing process. It's something that even continues. So, therefore, and we have to redo that and do that multiple times over as far as that is concerned. But in terms of data sets, we had the biggest collection of public data. We were using public data. But one of the things that we have realized is that the quality of public data in Indian languages is actually quite poor. So even a lot of the things that are ostensibly in Indian languages are actually translationese, where people have actually applied some kind of automatic methods. So it's interesting that even off the data we had to really look at really what is the highest quality data that we have. And then we have also building lots of methods by which we can synthetically create Indian language data. So we build actually specialized models to create data also in different forms. And, we look at all kinds of things, all kinds of public available data, whether it's on the web or whether it is a YouTube video or whether it is this thing, those things we would use. But in addition to that, we are basically actually having a very significant amount of synthetic data to actually create high quality data in Indian languages.
Okay, interesting. So you're actually building synthetic data as well to train. Okay, so let me then come to another point you talked about, the cost. And you said that, asking a question in an Indian language would actually be more expensive. And, there have been so many theories and reports about how much it costs OpenAI to answer one query. And apparently, they spend around $1 lakh a day to keep running, etc. That was the figures at least last year. So what does it take? What are the overall, larger costs involved? Because there are the GPUs, which are the graphic processing units, which essentially power this very powerful computing. There's the cloud, there are servers, etc.
So first thing, of course, is the kinds of ways that to run these LLMs. It is newer and newer techniques are being determined to actually make this more efficient. The second thing is that we're saying that for most use cases, right, assuming that we're not interested in AGI, a smaller model can actually be able to give you a very effective answer for what you want to do. So therefore, that is, of course, cheaper to run than a larger model. But having said that, if our goal is that we want 500 million or 1 billion Indians to use this, we've got to get the price point to where it becomes possible to do so.
Hemant, you wanted to add something on this?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very interesting point, and this kind of really appeals to the engineer in me because I love to geek out on this stuff a lot. And this actually was part of the investment thesis for Sarvam as well. You cannot build, this applies not just to AI, but for software in general. This also sort of goes back to why India has a reputation of not paying for software. There's a reason for that. You cannot build software in a $40,000 GDP per capita market and expect to sell it in a $2,500 GDP per capita market and expect to price it at the same levels to allow you to make profit in the parent country. It's just not possible. So because that has been what is happening in the world of software for many years, the only way to sort of make money from this market is to really price it very low, and then you don't really make profit, but you get usage in India. Or you price it really high and you're the market dominant force, like you're a Salesforce or SAP or something else. So nobody has a choice but to pay you what you want them to pay you. And then it doesn't really get mass adoption. Similar thing could happen with AI. LLM-driven AI or AI in general, if you are building it in a country where your per capita GDP is 10, 20 times where you're selling it, it is just really hard to make money, or it is really hard to get scale. So we wanted to really build something locally, and then hopefully we'll solve the money problem and the scale problem at the same time. But it requires a very new kind of bottom-up thinking on what do we focus on? Do we build models from 0 to 1? Do we fine-tune models? Do we make large models? Do we make mid-size or small models? So this all went into the investment thesis, and that allowed us to sort of focus on a certain group of people who are absolutely experts at doing it the way we think is the right way to do it. Now, if you train a model for $100 million, you've got to have 100 million tokens on the other side, priced at $1 each, to recoup the cost of the model. And in a market like India, that could take, you would not be able to price it that way because you'll not get usage. Or if you price it and 1/100th of it, you need to get a lot more people using it a lot more frequently to get to recoup the original cost. And by the time you recoup the original cost of the model, maybe 6 months have passed, maybe years have passed, maybe 6 years have passed. And in that time frame, the LLM is no longer relevant because the internet is adding more data every year than it already has today. So how do you then keep retraining it? And if you have a large model, retraining it is also very expensive. So that's the challenge that India AI, anybody who's targeting India from any other part of the world and is not focused on either voice or multimodal languages, multilingual languages, they're going to have that challenge.
And since we are talking about the different sizes of LLMs and different categories of LLMs, and hence the cost required and the capital required, it brings me to, you remember Sam Altman's quip when he was here in India and somebody asked him whether an AI company can be built on 10 million or an LLM can be built on 10 million. He said, you can try. But is that what is now happening, where with a smaller pool of capital than what an OpenAI can raise, you can still build LLMs, but of different sizes and of smaller sizes? Is that the approach that several Indian companies would take initially, at least till the capital comes in? Vivek, why don't you go first?
Yeah. So I think the point that, at least I can't talk about all other companies which are doing things. I can talk about what we are doing. We do believe that we want to build smaller LLMs. That is because of the, from cost of training as well as cost of inferencing. Actually, cost of training is less important, but eventually to be able to inference with that model extremely efficiently, we think that is something good, as well as the fact that we'll have to keep retraining these models. So therefore, if the model is smaller, it obviously is more effective. And we are looking at ways by which we are actually trying to take even existing models and add Indian language skills on top of models, so that it's not even a full training. Maybe it's a subset of a training, and there's a newer model come, and you can actually, certainly in open source models, we've how to actually retrofit Indian language skills on top of those kinds of things.
Is Sarvam LLM being built on the open source infrastructure of Meta?
So we can be built on top of existing open source LLMs. So Meta is an example, right? There are other open source LLMs also. We had actually released something called OpenHathi, which was actually an open sourced version where we had done pre-training by changing the tokenizers and making it work for Hindi. So therefore, that is an example of something that we do. So we can certainly be built on top of a model, but we can also train from scratch. So therefore, we have both of those capabilities to do.
And you're doing both.
Yes.
Right. Hemant, then my question is, will capital be a moat, at least initially? Because, in fact, you wrote a recent blog where you said that AI currently is in the CapEx cycle, right? The CapEx heavy cycle. There will be a lot of investments and a lot of work to be done to build the base and the foundation. Will that mean that there will be need for more capital, especially given, like you said, the global competition and the need to be not just the best in India, but best globally? For instance, Sarvam has raised about 40 million right now. Would they need continuous capital infusions to ensure that they are cutting edge?
So hard to see how the future, maybe this is a question for Vivek to answer. But to answer your question, Mugdha, 40 million goes a long way in India, in the Indian context, especially when the thesis is to build small models that are easy to train, cheaper to train, and easy to retrain and fine-tune. So I want to make sure, A, the 40 million goes a long way, regardless of whether you're doing apples to an OpenAI or somebody else, somewhere else. But even within that, we are doing it a specific, very sharp, targeted way, so that even goes further. But if your question is, would capital play an important role if you are in the capital intensive part of the business where training, research really matters to pull ahead of the world? Absolutely, yes.
Hemant, Bhavish Agarwal of Ola has already got a valuation of $1 billion for his AI startup. And, he has a strong set of investors and they can continue to raise a lot of capital. So, what do you make of a player in AI already becoming a unicorn in India? And again, will capital be the winner here?
I mean, look, Bhavish is a good friend and I think he's a fantastic entrepreneur. I can't comment on what valuation means in the context of building a company, because customers don't really want to find out how much money you've raised, who's on your cap table. They just care about what problem are you solving for them. Why should a customer care what my valuation is? How much capital I have in the bank? How many people I have in the company? They only care about, is this solving a problem for me? That's what I think we are very focused on. That's what I think everybody in this country solving population scale problems for this country should be focused on.
While Indian AI companies are raising funds, globally the likes of OpenAI and Anthropic have already raised billions of dollars. So, Vivek, my question to you then is, how will you fight off such bigger players?
In the end, I think you have to fight off by having something that is superior for use in the market that you're in. Definitely, if you want to build models for the Indian context, and by the way, not just models, and I think what we think is, especially, we talk of a voice first interface. The entire interface of how someone will interact with Gen AI, I think, needs to be reimagined and needs to be reimagined in the Indian context. I think for what we want to do, quite confident that we'll be able to manage that.
I want to come to the question around monetization. Vivek, if you can tell us about your plans for monetization at Sarvam AI.
Yeah, I think, we are focused, as we had mentioned previously, in a voice-to-voice LLM. So, and I think that, and we want to use this voice-based LLM to give different user experiences for Gen AI. And we think that this is a horizontal play, which will be actually across many different industries, right? There are the obvious ones like customer service or surveys or things like that. There are other things like education and healthcare, and where we see that these LLMs can actually play a very significant role. Our intent is to try to scale this and make this available at a very large scale in the country. I mean, the goal of the company is to get 500 million Indians to use Gen AI to actually improve their lives. That is the intent of what we want to do. And so therefore it is scale through scale. We will is our aim to do the monetization.
Right. And have you already started on the monetization journey?
No, we are still building out. We have the early technology demonstrators out there, but I think this is something that is going to play out in the future, hopefully in the near future.
So one last question to Hemant then, and again referring to your blog, Hemant, you've said that it's particularly more difficult for investors to gauge, when to come into this cycle. You could invest in the wrong asset or the right asset, but at the wrong time. And in fact, that brings me to a tweet that I think you also put out, and several people have put out on SoftBank and Nvidia, right? They exited Nvidia in 2019. And today, I mean, that company and that stock is just skyrocketing and that riding on the AI wave. As an investor, what are you looking at? You've come in at the LLM level with Sarvam. You also have several application level AI companies, Rephrase AI, etc. Are you betting across the whole spectrum?
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe an analog would help, right? So if you really truly believe, assume this is 1990s and internet is coming up and becoming more and more well distributed. As an investor, the long-term view you have taken is that internet is going to permeate every part of society. It'll change behaviors fundamentally, where people would not go back to how they were, perhaps ever, right? There are immense social, political, economic impact of a technology wave that becomes fully permeated in society. And if you really truly believe that AI, it has reached a point where it is now ready to get to mass adoption, then you wouldn't worry about which part of the stack you're investing in. You got to be careful about who you invest behind. If you're investing behind an application company, for example, you would then look for people that are committed to spending their lives till the underlying layers are stable, scalable, secure, cheap, and then the time for application will come, right? If you're investing in the infrastructure layer, then you better be sure that this team is world-class in terms of, the understanding of the infrastructure layers, software, distributed computing, AI research, LLM research, and so on and so forth, right? And that's how we orient. Our business is a business of nuance. We can't dream up the world for founders, but we can dream together with them. And then what we are really good at is evaluating whether this founder or this team of founders can turn that dream into reality. And it's very dream specific. So that's what we are really good at.
Vivek and Hemant, thank you so much for joining us and for simplifying AI. That was a deep dive into the fast-changing AI landscape and where India stands in the AI race. But that's all in this episode of The Morning Brief. This episode was brought to you by sound designer Amrit Reddy and producer Surohini Jain. Executive producers are Anupriya Nair, Anirban Chaudhary, and Arijit Barman. Thank you for listening, and if you like this episode, do spread the word. All new episodes of the Morning Brief podcast drop every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And it streams on Amazon Prime Music, JioSaavn, Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, and of course on ET's own audio platform, ET Play. All clips used in this episode belong to their respective owners. Credits are mentioned in the description.